Hey, I don't know about you, but I have experienced some serious hopelessness over the last 5 months, and I am, by and large, an optimist by nature. I'm normally up and happy, but these last 5 months have been greatly discouraging. Think about it, the coronavirus. None of us have ever experienced anything like this. Nobody, unless you're 103 years old and was a baby during the Spanish flu of 1918, none of us have gone through this. And that's a difficult thing. Our political situation is so nasty. The idea that we're going to have to spend the next 2.5 months watching political ads that are going to be so many untruths, that's very discouraging to me. I know there's still racial tension. I still see people on Facebook posting things that are happening to the African American community, and it is so disheartening to me. I think about school systems all around the country that are struggling with what to do. I think about parents all around the country that are struggling with what to do. I worry about help for those who are struggling financially, and I had so hoped that Congress would do something before they went away on vacation. But they went away on their vacation. They'll be back after Labor Day, and so many people are right on the brink of losing their houses. And I think this is so discouraging. So as I've been thinking about that this week, I thought about a story in the Bible that happened approximately 2,700 years ago, but it involved another group of people who too were greatly discouraged. It's the nation of Israel, and they actually were in captivity. They had been exiled by the Babylonians, and they were living in captivity. So that's pretty serious. I mean, that's probably more difficult than what we're going through. They had to leave their house and their land, and they had been exiled all the way in Babylon. And the prophet Isaiah is writing to them, trying to help them process where they are and what they should be thinking about if they are going to be able to endure the hardships that they were facing. Now you ask, where were they? Well, they are mired in desperate circumstances, captivity and exile. That's about as bad as it gets. The Jews were struggling seriously, and I feel like I can relate. I feel like you can relate, because truthfully, you and I have struggled. And we have been deeply discouraged, maybe more than any other time in our life over the last 5 months. Interesting what the Jews must have been thinking. I'm sure as they reflected on their past, they're thinking every time God blesses us with good things, we screw it up. And now we are in this hopeless situation. They would acquire wealth. If you look at their history, they would acquire wealth, which they would understand as God's blessing, but then they would use their wealth and power to oppress the poor. Can you imagine a nation being so silly that they would do that? Can you tell a little sarcasm? That's a little bit of yeah, we've done that, I'm sure. But even though they continue to screw things up by forgetting it was supposed to be about love, they were supposed to be living as a nation that understood it was love for all people, even the poorest of the poor, God still loved them. That never changes. That can never change, because God is love. Israel no doubt was discouraged because they thought this was the end for them. They had gone too far. They had screwed up to the point that maybe God would decide that God was no longer willing to be their God. Maybe they thought that God would not deliver them again like he had delivered their ancestors. They just felt stuck. Israel was so discouraged at their current situation, and if they thought about the past, they were even more discouraged because they realized the mistakes they had made along the way. So Isaiah is giving them a message, a prophetic message, a message as if God had spoken it himself to them. And this was the message in Isaiah 43, 18 and 19. As if God is speaking, forget all that. Forget all what? Forget all your past failures. Forget all the things that you think have gotten you in this mess. Forget all the things that you have done wrong. Forget that. Don't stop stressing on that. It is nothing compared to what I am going to do. For I, God, am about to do something new. See, I have already begun. Do you not see it? What was going on? It was as if the prophet was reaching into their hearts and saying, God wants you to be optimistic. Your future can be bright. Your future can be good, even in the midst of this despair, even in the midst of this horrible situation that you're in, even in the midst of things looking so fatalistic and doomsday. In the midst of all of that, God is saying, can't you see it? There's a brighter day in front of you. There is a brighter day. I'm sure there are many of us who've struggled with believing that there's a good future out there for us. There are moments that I have thought, yeah, this sucks and it's not going to get better. This is horrible. We have created this mess. We have allowed this mess to be where it is, and it's just going to continue. But I want you to understand something today. God really wants us to see a brighter future in front of us. God doesn't want us to be so discouraged in this moment that we can't have hope of a brighter tomorrow. And I want you to know that part of our issue, part of the reason we struggle with this, is so many of us have a very slanted, bad view of God and what God is all about. Here's what I believe with all of my heart. I believe that God is more concerned with our future than God is concerned about our past. God is more concerned with your future than God is with your past. Some people think that God is stuck on their past. They think that all God wants is to remind them of the things they have screwed up. I remember when I was a kid, and even into my adult life, I would try to say my prayers every night, and I would try to remember all those times I had made a mistake during the day, that I had sinned, right? You remember that. You remember thinking like that. And I would think, oh my gosh, what happens if I didn't remember all of my sins, and one sin I didn't ask for forgiveness, and that one sin was then going to cause me to be in trouble for the rest of my life. That's how I thought, that God somehow was so concerned about my past that he didn't want me to know God was with me, walking with me, loving me right now, and was walking with me into the future. God is much more interested in your future than he is with your past, because that's where you're going to spend your life. Where you're moving forward, that's where you're going to be. That's why Isaiah tells them that God wants them to forget about the past. Forget about the former things. Don't think about that. Look at the new things that have potential in front of you. Please understand, for many, it's important to get healing for your past. I understand that. Sometimes I think we struggle and we think God hasn't forgiven us for our past. Listen, God forgave. God is a forgiving God. There is nothing in your past God is holding over your head. Absolutely nothing in your past God is holding over your head. You maybe are holding some things over your own head. Maybe you have an issue with shame or guilt, but that's not God. God walks with you in love. God is not holding that against you. And what I have discovered is it's not healthy to try to walk this life carrying the heavy bags of guilt and shame. And I've tried to carry them. In my life, I've tried to carry them. I was thinking this week, when I was 11 years old, my family moved to Africa for my dad's work. So we moved to Africa. My aunt flew over to be with us. So there were 5 of us, my dad, my mom, my sister, my aunt, and me, 5 of us. When we came back, my dad decided that we would take this kind of around the world trip. Wonderful, wonderful opportunity. Well, we had 16 suitcases, and we had 5 people, but my sister was 9 years old. So she was maybe good for one little suitcase. She wasn't great. So we have 15 suitcases for 4 people. We were loaded down. And when I think about that, I think about people who are carrying around weights of guilt and shame on their back, and it has them stooped so low. I think God would say to you, don't move past that. Move past that. God's not mad about that. That was your past. Forgive yourself and move forward. Now, some people, it's not about guilt and shame, but what it is in their past is some deep wounds, some deep hurts, and that has you bogged down. You have a hard time moving forward because you have some wounds that cause you to just stay stuck. One of my favorite authors is a guy, he's passed away now. His name's Mike Yaconelli, died in a car wreck several years ago. But Mike Yaconelli was an incredible Christian leader. He was progressive when those of us from evangelical backgrounds, we didn't even know that was out there. And Mike, he just was out there. He just knew about love. He just knew about embracing all people. He just knew. He didn't care what, he got fired from every youth minister job he ever had because all he knew was loving everybody, and he didn't care two hoots for church rules and regulations. He just knew love. Fantastic guy. My favorite book that he wrote is called Messy Spirituality. Look it up, find it. If you can find it on Thrift Books or on Amazon, order it, get you a softback, and just keep it. It's one of the best books you'll ever read. Mike Yaconelli, Messy Spirituality. But he tells a story that is a true story, and it's about grace and a woman finally receiving healing for some hurt. Her name is Margaret, and she has spent decades battling depression and anxiety that were traced back to a horrible day in school when her school teacher, frustrated with her tardiness, made her stand in front of the room, and she invited all the students to come up to the board and write something bad about Margaret on the chalkboard. Can you imagine that, being a little girl? And do you think that teachers have done that to students? I totally believe, as wonderful as so many teachers are, and we have wonderful teachers in our church, and I know many wonderful teachers, I know there have been some teachers that have been that crazy and have done that kind of painful thing. Well, that's what he writes about. The kids were ruthless. While Margaret stands in front of the classroom, they wrote things like, Margaret is ugly, Margaret smells, Margaret is stupid. 25 students going up to the board and writing these hurtful things. And this event, according to Yaconelli, inflicted wounds that Margaret found difficult to heal. She battled depression, she'd battled discouragement, and she was angry all the time. And I've had so many people who've told me, yes, when you have those kind of wounds, that's what it does to you. Finally, as an adult, she goes to a psychologist for help. She spent 2 years meeting weekly with her psychologist. And finally, they had reached the end of the session. The psychologist felt like she had finally maybe experienced enough healing that she could move forward. This is how Yaconelli tells the story. The counselor, her psychologist, said, Margaret, I know this will be difficult, but just to make sure you're ready to move on, I'm going to ask you in this last session to do something for me. I want you to go back to your schoolroom in your mind, and I want you to detail the events of the day. Take your time. I want you to describe each of the children as they approach the blackboard. Remember what they wrote and remember how you felt. And I want you to do it for all 25 students. In a way, Yaconelli writes, this would be easy for Margaret. For 40 years, she had remembered every detail. And yet to go through the nightmare one more time would take every bit of strength that she had. After a long silence, she began the painful description. One by one, she described each of the students vividly as though she had just seen them, stopping periodically to regain her composure, forcing herself to face each of those students one more time. Finally, she was done, and the tears would not stop. They could not stop. Margaret cried a long time before she realized the counselor was whispering her name. Margaret, Margaret, Margaret. She looked up to see her counselor staring into her eyes, saying her name over and over again. Margaret stopped crying for a moment. Margaret, the counselor said, you left out one person. I certainly did not. I have lived with this story for 40 years. I know every student by heart. No, the counselor said, you forgot one. You forgot someone. See, that someone is in the back of the classroom. That someone is standing up and walking towards your teacher, Miss Garner, and she is handing him a piece of chalk, and he's taking it. Margaret, he's taking it. Now he's walking to the blackboard, and he's picking up an eraser, and he is erasing every one of those sentences. They're gone. Margaret, they're gone. Do you recognize him yet? Margaret, his name is Jesus. Look, he's writing new sentences on the board. Margaret is loved. Margaret is beautiful. Margaret is gentle and kind. Margaret is strong. Margaret has great courage. And Margaret began to weep. But very quickly the weeping turned into a smile and then into laughter and then into tears of joy. What had she done? She had gone back to her broken place and she had imagined God in solidarity with her in that place of brokenness, and she was able to find healing. I really believe, at least for me in my life, the best way to mend a broken heart was for me to give all the broken pieces of my heart to God and understand that God is with me, has always been with me, and was with me even in those broken places. God was with me. So, I guess I would say to you, your past is important, but God wants to heal your past and wants you to forget the things that are holding you back from your past, and God is more concerned with your future than he is with your past. Do you remember when Jesus encountered Simon Peter after Peter had denied Jesus 3 times? So now it's like their first meeting, and I'm sure Peter's feeling so guilty, and I would think, if I were Jesus, I would have said, Peter, what you denied me 3 times. I thought I could depend on you. I couldn't depend on you. But Jesus never, ever went back and cared about that. He just said, do you love me? Do you love me? Then do those things that God is calling you to do. Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. It wasn't about the past. It was about the future. I went through some serious shame and guilt. Went through a divorce as a young guy, and it absolutely devastated me. And I didn't know if I'd ever get past it. But finally, through a lot of listening to people that were way smarter and wiser than I could ever be, I listened and listened and listened, and finally it broke through. God wanted to take all of my life, and God assured me something beautiful could be made out of all of my life if I would just offer it up. And I did, and God has, and I'm so happy. Here's the second truth. First truth is, don't get hung up on your past. As you're discouraged right now, don't worry about that so much. Get your eyes on a better future. But here's the second thing. Our future has more potential. Your future has more potential than you could even have ever imagined. Couple of scriptures from the New Testament. The Apostle Paul, many people think he's talking about heaven, and maybe he is talking about heaven, but I think the principle is there. 1 Corinthians 2:9, Paul says this, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no human mind has conceived the things God has prepared for us. No eye has seen, no ear has heard those things that God has prepared for us. In Romans 8:18, Paul says this, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. What is that saying? We've got some great stuff in us that's going to be revealed. Our future is bright. How does this work? Well, I think part of it is you and we're getting better. We are getting better. And as we get better, we handle life better. Listen, I handle life so much better as a 58-year-old than I did as a 28-year-old. We're talking light years different. I handle life so much better as a 58-year-old than I did a 48-year-old. What's happening? I really believe that God is growing me up. God is helping me. I really believe. What does Romans 8:28 say? All things work together for good to those who are called according to God's purpose. And often we don't even think about what is God's purpose, but that's in the next verse, verse 29, to conform us to the image of his Son, to help us become more like Jesus. That's what it says, to help us become more like Jesus. And I've got a long ways to go, but I have come light years from where I started. And so for my own individual life, I think, yes, things are getting better. I'm more optimistic. Regardless of what happens in the country, I am more optimistic because I am growing up. And you're growing up. What did Maya Angelou say? When I knew better, I did better. That's what's happening for us. As we know better, we do better. I believe things are going to be better for us individually and collectively. I really believe our country is going to become a better country. In fact, if you track us over the last 250 years, we are getting better. You say, no, I thought it was Make America Great Again, like we're reflecting back on an America in the 1950s. Isn't that what we're supposed to be trying to aspire to? Would you want to be an African American in America in 1950? I don't want that. We have gotten so much better in race relations now than we were then. We have gotten better in almost every area. And you say, well, crime, well, would you believe that crime actually is less now than it was then? It's just we have a lot more people now. So there's more crime, of course, because there's a lot more people, but we actually are doing better. There's more literacy than there have ever been in the history of the world. There's more literacy around the world than ever. There's less people starving right now than ever in the history of the world. There's so many areas of life where things are getting better. And it appears, certainly, that we are going through a little setback. There's a discouraging period. We're in lockdown. This doesn't feel great. But I want you to know, as a country, we're getting better. I think about my LGBTQ friends. Listen, we've come a long ways. We've come a long ways. And they have experienced all of the tough times that they've experienced and the persecutions that they've experienced and the being rejected by their families. But you know what? It's getting better. They'll tell you, it has gotten so much better. Who would have thought that our country would endorse gay marriage and we would have that all 50 states? But we do. We are getting better, and we are going to continue to get better. I really believe in the future we are going to be better. Here's the final truth I want to share with you about our future. And I believe this is super important. To really experience this future that I think is kind of resonating with me right now, we need to position ourselves to receive, walk in, and then give out divine love. That's what we need to do. We need to position ourselves in a way that we receive, walk in, and give out divine love. In other words, you can't sit in a reclining chair and never look around at people and never look for ways to pour out love to people and see things happen in your life. It doesn't work like that. It is going to require some focus. It might require some vigilance. It might require some concentration. But it can happen when you allow that love to fill you and you walk in it and then you give it out. I saw a cute meme on Facebook this week. It was a girl saying, I need to get my life together, but I'm kind of waiting to see if the world is going to end before I put any real effort in. And I relate to that. It's like, yeah, if it's going to end, I don't guess I want to try very much. But you know what? It's not going to end. It's not going to end. We can put the efforts in and for this better life that is in front of us. Here's a few things I want to ask you to do. I want you to really think about the tribe of people that you're going to live your life with. Maybe the pandemic is a good time for you to think, what tribe of people do you feel really connected to that you're going to walk into this beautiful future with? And this is not in any way hate-filled at all, but there are some people that you have tried to be in their tribe, but they discourage you. They kill what is good inside of you. And I want to suggest that you love them from a distance and you find those people around you that help you flourish. Find those people around you that love you for who you are. And if I can just throw a couple of suggestions out to you, I would look at the Village Church as a place that could be your tribe, because I want you to know we love everybody. That has been our motto for a long, long, long time. We love everybody, and we are filled with grace. We are not judgmental. We just want our arms to be open for people to be able to come into this tribe and experience the goodness of God. That's what we want more than anything. And of course, Everybody Church. If you're not a part of Everybody Church, I want you to, on Facebook or YouTube, I want you to subscribe to that channel or click a like on Facebook so you can see the messages that come from Everybody Church. You can be a part of that tribe. They have groups that you can be a part of. because it is important, the tribe you're going to be in. And so if you want your future to be bright, give some thought to the tribe you're going to be a part of. Another thing I'd suggest for each of us is to listen up. Listen up to that voice of love that is in the atmosphere, and then follow that voice to wherever that voice leads you. You say, well, what if I misread it? You might, but I trust you. I trust you. As long as it is love that is leading you, love, you'll get where you need to go. Another thing I'd suggest for each of us is to spend some time looking up and looking out. Try to see people and situations through heavenly eyes. Look up and look out and try to see people through heavenly eyes. There is a lot of pain in the world. This past week, I read about a 20-year-old girl who got a tattoo on her thigh, and from one angle, it said, "I'm fine." But from another angle, it said, "Save me." And when I read more of the story, the girl had recently been diagnosed with severe depression, clinical depression, and outwardly, she told everybody she was fine, but inwardly, she was saying, "Please help me. Please help me." I wonder how many people we run into each day who are saying the very same thing. So ask God for a vision to see people who are hurting. Are you thinking about the poor? I can't get them out of my mind. I see so many people who are stomping their feet because they were getting $600 more than they were supposed to get. Why does that bother people so much? Do you know what their bills were? Do you know anything about their situation? Then why, if you don't, then why are you going to stomp your feet? Why wouldn't you care about the poor getting help? And oh, by the way, if people aren't able to spend money, do you understand the economy goes away? You understand we want people spending as much money as they can spend during these difficult times. And when poor people are given extra, when people who are workers are given a little extra maybe than what they've made, they will spend it. And do you know that helps the economy? Think about poor people. Try to see them through God's eyes. Think about immigrants. Think about how they have struggled. If they're here without insurance, without citizenship, if they get sick, they can't, what are they going to do? Think about them. Think about African Americans during this time. This has been difficult. This has been difficult. Think about them. Think about every group, those in prison. We have a guy from our church that's in jail, Fulton County Jail, and he's been there for 2 years without even a hearing. And now with the pandemic, it looks like it'll be into 2021 before he will even have a hearing. He might be in there 3 years before they ever have a trial. Can you imagine what that's like? They have a system now where he calls me about every day. And I cherish that because I know how lonely he is. And I know that just a minute or two conversation maybe can be helpful to him. How about those who are sick? I found out a couple of weeks ago that one of my best friends, Dr. Gene Greisman, had gotten coronavirus. And Dr. Greisman almost died. He's now home and he is healing, but it was serious. And I wonder about other people. This is tough. How about parents sending their kids to school? That's tough. What about parents who have their kids at home and trying to balance their job and their kids? That's tough. I think for all of us, we have to get a heavenly perspective as we look at people, and love should flow to all of these people in all these situations. Let me tell you something. Your future is bright. If I was a betting guy, I'd bet on you because you're getting better. You're growing up. You're not who you were. You're getting better. You're loving more. You know you are loving more. You are including more. You are better than you used to be. And because of that, I want you to know there is hope. Your future is going to be okay. Your future is going to be okay. Well, thank you for spending these few minutes with us. We really do love you. I'm glad you got to see Jane today. We talk about you every day. We talk about you and how much we love you and how much we are so proud to be a part of the Village family and the Everybody Church family. Some of the finest people that we have ever met in the world consider those two places their tribes. And for that, we are so grateful. We think about you and we're praying for you. We love you. Don't forget, your future is going to be okay. Hang in there. Love you. Have a beautiful week.